Welcome to Season 6 of Far Reach Voyages, where we share our love of offshore sailing and adventure travel. I've missed sailing the last 18 months. I took the time off from voyaging so I could take care of a couple of projects on the boat. I installed new mahogany combings in the cockpit of the Far Reach. I removed, stripped, revarnished, and reinstalled the bowsprit. Gail and I repainted the cabin top with all grip. We also added a blue boot stripe above the waterline. All those projects took time. But the most important reason for taking time off was to conduct 2 long-range overland expeditions in our Jeep. The first was a 42-day odyssey across America. My daughter asked me to take her Jeep camping as a college graduation gift, with the California redwoods and the Pacific Ocean as our turnaround point. We had a blast camping across the country. It was a wonderful, irreplaceable experience for both of us. I felt so fortunate to be able to spend that kind of time with her, and I know I'll remember it for the rest of my life. Then, in October and November, Gail and I spent 30 days overland camping from North Carolina to the Grand Canyon and back home. Our Jeep is rugged, comfortable but Spartan, and simple, just like the Far Reach. I've traveled across much of America during my life, and I've found great beauty everywhere I've been, and we were not disappointed this time either. For those who haven't tried it, overland camping is a rewarding form of adventure travel, and best of all, it's as affordable as you need it to be. Now begins the preparation for spring launch. A lot of washing. A little bit of painting. Some cockpit touch-up. Can't wait. It's the 17th of March. Happy St. Patty's Day. Down at the boat, taking care of a few projects, getting her ready for her launch in a couple of weeks. Applied some Kiwi non-skid deck paint to touch up a few areas on the deck. Been sanding the bulwarks and touching up the cockpit a little bit. Lots of small projects. One of the ones I put off for a long time is doing some fairing on the rudder. And a couple of years ago I faired in our through-hole fittings. We only have 3 and they're all flush. And then we can do to help with reducing the drag underwater. This is the prop shaft modification we made when we installed an engine in the boat. Just adding little things to help reduce underwater turbulence. And the rudder, like a lot of rudders on fiberglass boats, was sort of rounded and about 1/2 inch, 5/8 inch thick on the trailing edge, which doesn't do anything for reducing drag at low speed particularly. A lot of turbulence coming off the trailing edge, so I started sanding it down, trying to see what I could do. I wasn't exactly sure what I would find. It actually looks pretty good. Gel coat's back down to the laminate. There's a few voids in here, which is common in hand-laid fiberglass boats. But the trailing edge now is down to 3/16 of an inch, about where I want it. We'll apply barrier coat and bottom paint. And then I think that will be pretty good. And again, if you haven't seen the video on installing the engine, where we talk at great length about installing the shaft log and how we changed the whole layout of the boat. Originally the prop shaft was down here and the rudder. A lot of turbulence, and we pulled the engine out, we filled it in, and we sailed it that way for 5 years. And then when I finally installed the small beta diesel, we had to put a new shaft log in, and I didn't want to open up that aperture and induce all that turbulence. So I came out above the rudder. Actually, the rudder came up to about here. I cut about that much off of the rudder and then epoxied it onto the keel here, and then closed off the rudder. So I lost about 4 inches of rudder, not that much. And the shaft log comes out along that, or folding prop. So minimal drag underwater, and this is going to help us, especially in that light air. Lots of things that we can do to make heavy displacement full keel boats perform much better than they would otherwise. So come springtime, I was eager to get back on the water, as I've been planning some new voyaging adventures. However, sometimes what you want to happen, what you think is going to happen, is not what happens. As I began removing the cover to prep the boat for spring commissioning, I noticed bubbling paint and some corrosion on the mast between the deck and the gooseneck. How bad was it? The boat's obviously dirty here. They haven't been washed. You can see a year and a half of just dirt even under the cover. This is the main winch, main halyard winch. You can see this bubbling here. There's a little corrosion over here. And then this is the staysail halyard block. Corrosion. This was powder coated by a guy who did obviously a terrible job. You can see how the moisture's completely penetrated it. This will have to come off when I pull the mast, and should never have been powder coated. I learned my lesson. This should have just been painted. Once I removed the cover, I found the bubble paint was a bit more extensive than I had originally thought. I had two choices. I could ignore it for the time being and head off on the long-planned expedition, or I could deal with it now. Well, the boat was already on the hard in a boatyard I was familiar with, close to my home, my shop, and my tools. I didn't take the decision to pull the mast lightly. It hadn't been down in almost 9 years, though, since I originally stepped at the conclusion of the 6-year rebuild. I knew I'd feel better offshore if I took care of it now instead of later. Roy and Billy, the owners of the boatyard, are experts at pulling mast. They knew the crane operator and easily rigged the slings. The mast came down in about 20 minutes without difficulty. Then began the long job of removing the standing and running rigging as well as the attached hardware. Fortunately, when I built the mast, I coated all the fasteners with Tef gel, an anti-seizing compound designed to prevent galvanic corrosion, which can lock stainless steel fasteners to aluminum, making them impossible to remove without resorting to drastic measures. All the fasteners came out smoothly, except for two, which I removed with patience, penetrating oil, and an inexpensive hand impact driver. If you can see on here, but that's UHMW tape I put on there to act as a barrier between the stainless and the aluminum. It's only in the areas that it wasn't on there that it seemed to cause bubbling on there. Once the hardware was removed, I began inspecting the mast closely. I developed a plan and then sanded all the areas where the paint was bubbling or it looked compromised. I washed the spar with Dawn dishwashing detergent just to get any dirt and grime off before I start de-waxing it. before we sand it. While I was working on the mast, I designed a removable flap for the aft end of my pram hood so I can keep the hatch open while sailing downwind in the rain, but still see out from under the hood. A local canvas shop did a nice job of building it. With the mast washed and dewaxed, I sanded the selected areas with 40 and 60 grit back to bright metal and then immediately applied 2 coats of Pettit Alumaprep epoxy primer to the bare metal. Next, I applied 2 coats of All Grip 545 epoxy finish primer. Then I sanded the entire mast with 320 grit abrasives. We rigged the mast clear of the sawhorses by using luff groove slides and jack stands. We were ready to roll and tip the All Grip top coat, but you'll have to wait for the next episode to see how it turned out. If you enjoyed this episode of Far Reach Voyages, let us know in the comments. Also, consider liking and subscribing, as it tells us you would like to see more videos and it helps the channel grow. See you in the next episode.